Welcome to the Well-Known Podcast. I'm Elizabeth Garber. This series is focused on bringing leading voices to talk about the new frontiers of innovation in and around the identity industry. Last week, we talked about death and the digital estate. On today's show, I interview Dr. Tobin South, who recently authored Identity Management for Agentic AI, the new frontier of authentication, authorization, and security for an AI agent world. As Tobin points out, we really are heading into a new paradigm for identity. I wanted to talk to him about whether the protocols we have are sufficient, what gaps in standards need to be filled, and whether we are ready for what's to come. So listen up. So, Dr. Tobin South, welcome to the Well-Known Podcast.
What a great name for a podcast. I just think it's funny, it's on the nose. If you know, you know. Well done.
Yeah, thank you. It's all in the branding too. So why don't we jump right in and have you introduce yourself?
Okay, so I guess what's in my .well known, what is my OAuth protected resource? I'm Tobin. I am the head of AI agents for WorkOS, which is a security and auth vendor, and also a research fellow at Stanford University in the Loyal Agents Initiative, which is work on protecting consumers in particular in transactional relationships mediated with agents and the future of what that looks like. And I guess as part of that, an author of a cool new report that we might talk about.
Do you want to tell us what the name of that report is?
The Identity Management for Agentic AI white paper from the OpenID Foundation on the future of authorization, authentication, and identity in the world that we're about to enter into with AI agents.
Absolutely, and we're going to post a link to that paper right beneath this listing, so listeners can find their way to it and have a good read and appreciate your design skills as well. Why don't
we should do the backstory, which is that Elizabeth and I went through a lot of design feedback review on what cover pages and figures should look like.
Yeah.
The hidden element of writing all reports.
Tobin successfully made me feel old and then produced something with 80s vibes.
Brilliant.
So go ahead, Tobin, paint a picture of this future that we're walking into.
So I did my PhD at MIT, which I finished earlier this year, in AI security. And the core idea that drove my research thesis is that agents are becoming increasingly autonomous, increasingly capable, and increasingly connected to the world. Really, that's my definition of an AI agent. It's not just a chatbot or a language model. It's some kind of language model-based system that is connected to a bunch of tools to take action in the world. Because frankly, I want AI that does stuff for me and that is useful, and that requires it to go out and do things on my behalf. And this is really exciting, but also introduces a bunch of security risks and questions around how we make sure AI doesn't go completely rogue, not in the scary AGI sense, although that's a relevant question, but in the mundane, I don't want my AI accidentally transferring my money somewhere that it shouldn't. I don't want my AI buying random things on my behalf and then I have to go and return all of them.
Yeah.
And then in an enterprise context, you just really don't want things to go. So that's this kind of grand vision of AI is getting better, and we need to really rethink about security and access control.
Absolutely. And just last week, we released the first episode of this podcast, which was about death in the digital estate. And so I start thinking about, well, after I'm gone, does my agent outlive me? What's the process going to be for stopping that agent at the point at which I am no longer there to oversee it? I'm assuming no one's thought about that yet. Am I wrong?
Yeah, my research usually doesn't get that dark that quickly, at least. But I think there's an analogous problem, which is that in order for agents to be useful, you provision them access to a bunch of services. You connect them in an enterprise context to a bunch of tools so they can go out and do something. But much like any employee would, or your own personal connections to services, you need to be able to deprovision them. Offboarding is just as important as onboarding. And if we have a bunch of highly autonomous systems out there, systems that can go and make independent decisions based on inputs and take actions. Think of a an AI workload in an enterprise, which is listening for customer feedback and then goes and, builds PRs, code review suggestions that improve features. You don't want this having access to all your code forever and never being offboarded and deprovisioned. That is a security risk that we should not think about. And the same is true in consumer contexts, where ChatGPT is just out there. You set a reminder for it to buy you a new pair of shoes forever, long after you die. Who's turning that off?
Yeah. Yeah. Dean, I think Dean Sachs, who was on last week's show, he would say it always comes back to joiners, movers, leavers. Oh, you're
Joiners, movers, leavers. Couldn't agree more.
yeah.
And the same is true for agents. We just kind of have a new person in the loop, more person, new identity in the mix.
New
And we need
identity
to
in
figure
the
out how to deal with that.
Why don't we start with exploring some of the areas where standards exist today, where they're appropriate? Because this is what you really dive into in the first chapter of your paper. So why don't we start there? Haven't we solved all of this?
Yeah, right. So part one is about agents as they currently stand. So as we are recording this, OpenAI just put out a new agents SDK to allow people to build agents. And when we think of an agent, you might often think of ChatGPT agent mode, which can go out and do things, or Anthropic's Claude Code, or Claude, which can perform actions. These are all versions of agents. And the existing standards around auth, and I speak quite broadly when I say auth. I don't just mean OAuth 2, but I also mean SCIM, the standards around identity provisions from IDP. They're all ready to go for agents. There's little bits of work. There's implementation details we need to sort out. And a lot of what has happened in the model context protocol, which is something we can unpack, has been around taking these existing standards and applying them correctly and robustly to agent workflows. But we don't need to reinvent the wheel and make new standards. In fact, I don't think we have time to make new standards for the current agents that exist. Standards take time. The AI world moves very fast. So it's about applying existing standards. And these are already really robust.
So why should they change at all? What's different?
So if you look at something like the Model Context Protocol, which is this incredibly exciting protocol designed to help connect agents, AI systems, to external tools and resources. These, which is an addition on top of tool calling and other examples where agents can interact with systems. This has been designed from an auth perspective around, I'm going to add my tool into Claude, and then Claude is going to go out and help perform a few actions on my behalf when I ask it to. Or you're going to add this tool into Cursor, you're going to add the Superbase tool into Cursor, and it will go and edit your databases, perform SQL queries for you. And this is really cool. It's really powerful. We're seeing wide adoption of this. All the major AI vendors are excited to support this. But if we go from a simple chatbot example to more autonomous systems where you don't know the full scope of what this system wants to access, we run into issues. So I guess maybe I can give an example. Exactly. Well, so maybe an example that will help articulate this. I recently flew to London for the MCP Dev Summit, which was very fun. And I want to use a bunch of different services. Maybe I want to use the Chase Travel booking portal. Maybe I want to use booking.com. Maybe I have reward points with some random hotel that I got emailed about. And so I know how to provision upfront my ChatGPT instance to have access to my email. That's very easy to do access controls around that. But when it eventually finds in my email that I should probably pop up to Oxford and I probably need to get a rail pass and set all of that up, it needs to escalate its scope over time to perform more and more actions. And there are some standards that support this, like step-up auth or client-initiated back-channel auth, but there is also questions around how you do dynamic policy enforcement in increased autonomy, or questions around how you avoid consent fatigue, where I'm constantly being pinged by AI. Like, is it okay if I do this? Is it okay if I do this? What about this? It's exhausting. I want my AI to just go and do things.
I mean, we're already at risk of consent fatigue today, let alone when we have this technology with huge processing power doing all these different things on our behalf, more than one agent.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, I think that's a very, very real
Yeah.
problem and user experience issue that will lead to real implications if we're just hitting yes, yes, yes. Go on, agent, do this. Oh,
Yeah.
shoot, how much did I just trade?
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I wonder
Okay.
how long until you, Elizabeth, have an app on your phone that is just approving.
You mentioned before that we don't have time necessarily to solve all these problems. So where would you say are the like key areas where we need to be consensus building rather than charging ahead to innovate? Like,
So I don't know if anyone's read the news lately, but it's hard to slow things down in the modern world, and the AI labs like to move very fast. AI products in general try to move very fast.
mhm.
And this is super exciting. I live in San Francisco where the place is abuzz with innovation. And I think this is great for the world in many ways. The problem is that introducing security into that gets really hard. And so, where do standards fit into this? I think any kind of standard which seeks to constrain AI, especially from at a high level, what should people build or what should they not build, is in some sense doomed to fail, because the YC startups of this world and the AI labs will build what they believe the market wants and kind of just keep pushing on that frontier. But insofar as the standards community can find consensus as to what the risks are and what existing tooling and ideas or proposals that are already in the pipeline could be useful as Lego bricks to build robustness and safety into these wild AI systems that are being built. I think that's really exciting and a great place for the standards community to be.
When you talk about risks in the
Mm.
context of standards, are you thinking solely in the context of security, or are you thinking also about ethics?
I from the work OS side, the company I work for, we think about enterprise integrations and enterprise security. And I
Mm.
think a lot of the use cases of agents right now are in enterprise contexts where it's really powerful to um, unlock value through agents, but also the risks are massive and kind of proportional to the value they unlock often.
Mm.
In consumer contexts, the risks are often capped, and there is also a built-in notion of fraud that's quite common in consumer contexts, that you will sometimes just order the wrong shoes and you'll inevitably return them.
I just did that.
It happens. I have bought so many pairs of jeans that don't fit me, and I don't know why I keep
Mhm.
messing it up, but it happens. And I don't think AI is going to solve that problem. I think it potentially might make things a lot worse. And this is where the consumer reports work that we've been doing comes in, where we really want to think about how to keep ecosystems vibrant. If it turns out that you have ChatGPT buying you stuff on Shopify stores all the time and then returning it or revoking the transaction, if those fraud rates go up, which are already priced in, things will get more expensive and consumer experiences will get worse. And it's not so much an ethics question, I think, as it's a we want to make sure that markets and experiences stay positive and vibrant, um, and not fall apart at the scale that agents can operate at. And so it's not just security; it's about keeping things healthy in some
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. And do you see a role for law and regulation here? So this is veering well off the standards, consensus building track, and more like, are there guardrails that really the standards community is not responsible for, but
Mm. Mm.
other policymakers are responsible for?
It's a great question. It's a hard question. I was one of the authors of the 2025 International AI Safety Report, where I
Mhm.
wrote the privacy and security sections. And we talked a lot about what it means for AI to be quote unquote safe and what safety means. And many interpretations of this, especially in contexts like the EU AI Act, rest upon identifying AI systems upfront, so transparency and communication with users. It relies upon consent as a key principle of the deployment of AI, and other kind of more things like risk assessments as part of this is something a high risk engagement. And essentially, as you move to more autonomy, more general purpose, and higher risk contexts, the value of authorization with a Z more broadly becomes critical. And so I think actually in many ways, these very broad regulations that have been put in place might be a driver of robust interoperable identity standards for agents, and an adoption of interoperable security principles and the robust use of OAuth in agent interfaces like MCP.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you have any top recommendations for places where standards bodies should be getting in the game now, where there's a gap in standards or?
Mm-hmm. I think there are real actionable touch points of communities that are making massive change. I think the Model Context Protocol is one of them. It's being rapidly and widely adopted. It only came to life in November, December last year, and suddenly it has massive adoption from a huge number of AI players and a huge number of participants building in this space. And they have a governance process and a standard enhancements process, and that can be really impactful. But something you see in that process, I'm trying to write a standard enhancement proposal right now, is it's always tied back to existing standards and proposals. If you're trying to do something with auth or access controls, it's great when you can tie it to a draft or an idea that already exists. And so folks who are members of, participants in, organizers of standards bodies at large or regulatory bodies at large, there's a huge opportunity to contribute ideas to this pile that can go into the cutting edge labs. Even if the standard doesn't fully get adopted in the time frame that is normally acceptable for standards, you might be able to put an idea out there and have OpenAI just adopt it into ChatGPT, which is a version of success for a standard in a different way. And I think every standards body needs to have some working group really pushing on the cutting edge of AI and watching where it's going.
So Tobin, do you mind mapping out for me some of the areas where people are designing new standards, like the A2A protocol, for example? Tell us a bit more about what's going on.
Yeah, there's a massive push from a bunch of industry players on new approaches of using AI in a connected way to enable agents. So the Model Context Protocol is one of them that is by far the most popular, which is essentially a tool calling type paradigm that allows models to interact with systems. It's very powerful, has a lot of features and extensions, although a large portion of the usage is just API wrapping and tool using, but maybe in the future that will move more broadly. There are ideas like the agent-to-agent communication protocol that came out of Google and is now, I believe, with the Linux Foundation, on how does my agent talk to an external agent in order to get something done. So my ChatGPT talks in natural language to Salesforce's Agentforce, which in turn may talk in natural language to ServiceNow's AI agent, each allowing that vertical, that external player and agent, to interpret the request and perform actions to complete the desired action. And this adds a lot of questions around how you do access controls and consent and intent fidelity on the instruction to external agents. There's lots and lots of questions around how you coordinate these multi-agent systems. They're very scary. And if anyone listening to this finds it interesting, email me and we'll chat more. Then there are kind of more, I don't want to say exotic, but provocative, certainly, standards like AP2, the payments tooling coming out of Google, KYA Pay out of Skyfire and Visa, as well as the Stripe, Shopify, OpenAI partnership on agent payments. And these are all approaches of doing payment infrastructure for agents. How do you know what the consumer's intent to purchase was, what their intent mandate or their cart mandate, what they actually really wanted to buy? And then unlock agents purchasing things on your behalf. And these are really interesting for the, the dot well known conversation because they're tied into notions of identity. KYA, which is know your agent, draws from know your customer as an idea. That we care online about knowing who people are, and payments are one way of enforcing that.
Mm-hmm.
And so as agents roll out and do stuff with us, it's going to be interesting.
So how many of these efforts are, real consensus building, standards development, working groups, as opposed to, a single entity putting out there in the open something that they're hoping becomes the de facto standard, so they could take the market.
Yep. Great question / undertoned comment of
It's not really intended to be totally I'm not really judging it. Although the follow-up question might be like, let's judge it together. Let's assess the pros and cons, right? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, please. I'm kind of curious to hear your thoughts. I think we're certainly seeing everyone. These all start out with one player in the space puts out their open standard and says they'll support it, and then they kind of blindly hope everyone else supports it. But we see things like the most mature ones, like Model Context Protocol, the working group. While it came out of Anthropic originally, and while it still has a lot of Anthropic influence, it certainly has a wide support from other players. And the standards working group is driven by folks from a bunch of different AI players: Microsoft, OpenAI, Google, folks from Google, folks from identity players like Okta are all playing in this MCP space and putting forward proposals. Do you think it's a great model? You just kind of you throw it out there, you push it out of your company, and then try and corral collaboration.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I'm reserving judgment. Obviously, I work for the OpenID Foundation, which is a consensus building effort that has many, many, many members, and no one entity can put out there a single a standard that only it supports. Even to launch a working group takes multiple entities in the OpenID Foundation. And so I think there is value in that. I think there's also value in the speed at which certain things can get done when it's done by a single entity. So I'm kind of watching this space really carefully and personally trying to form an opinion about where it's appropriate to push something out there and see what happens, versus where actually we need to make sure that there aren't too many vested interests in a space, So
do you think, let me turn this interview on its head and say, how could organizations like the OpenID Foundation or many others with listeners in this audience reinvent the infrastructure of these standards organizations to progress and keep up to date with the pace of change in the AI world?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we should do another podcast about that at some point. Maybe get a panel together with a few different standards bodies and organizers to talk about how standards can keep pace. I think that's a really valuable question. But we've just, we've seen a lot of speed in the MCP protocol, and we've seen other efforts come together quicker than average, I would say. Put a pin in that.
It's good. Stay tuned for a future episode, I guess.
Stay tuned. We're going to map that one out and figure out who our experts are going to be that come on and discuss it. I think it's a really great question. I know exactly a few of the people that I'm going to invite. So
there was some great discussion as well at the UN's AI for Good conference with folks working in standards about how can we keep up to pace. So I think it's a great topic.
Yeah, let's you can share those details with me. We'll plan out the episode together. Okay, so let's get back into the meat of your paper. Do we want to jump into some of the future areas that you identified in I think chapter 3, is it? Or chapter 4? Lots of chapters. Really
There's
good.
too many chapters. Just ask ChatGPT to summarize each chapter. Um, the in many ways, I think a lot of writing nowadays is writing for language models. When I wrote my PhD dissertation, I wrote it for the language models to learn. Hopefully, I'm as of now marginally smarter, I hope, than the average language model on at least the topic of my research. Um,
That's good. Yeah.
let's hope. I don't know how long that will be true for, but humans are welcome to read it, but the target audience is ChatGPT. Um, and we all must contribute our part to the pre-training data. And so these future-looking questions of what we should address, I believe, and folks are welcome to disagree, that AI systems will increasingly be capable of being autonomous and taking long time horizon actions with large numbers of tool use operations, and that they will increasingly be deployed to do so in a range of contexts, from within organizations, within research labs, within consumer workflows. And I think we need to think about how these standards we currently have and those we don't yet have fully fleshed out can scale into this world. And I think a big part of that is identity for agents. How do we do robust identification of agents at scale? Which I think a lot of folks are already working on, especially commercial players, and I'm really excited for that. And what is probably less explored is dynamic access control. How do we take context that exists in how these systems are being used and use that in the process of determining authorization and access? So it's not just you predefine a set of scopes of what a thing can do and then let it run. You want those scopes to change. You want those scopes maybe to be in natural language and maybe dynamically enforced by a separate and protected and evaluated language model that might be smaller. We want to do access controls on top of how different tools are being used and figure out how to add tools dynamically using discoveries like the MCP registry, and really think about what we need to build for that kind of future. Because we need to, if we're doing a standards timeline, we have to start thinking now about where AI will be in 5 years or 3 years if we want to have an impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, one thing I'm going to ask you, because you triggered so is there any effort going on at the moment to work out how trust can be established across? I think you've answered it, actually. How do you establish trust between agents across different boundaries?
I think that's a super interesting topic. There are lots of folks working on it. There are ideas like the OpenID Federation to build a network of trust that is grounded in your relationship with existing entities. There is also centralized approaches to this where you have either a set of identity providers that can provide kind of trustworthiness or attestations towards an agent. You also have players that are trying to capture the registry to be the Google search of agents. So if you're looking at tools in a registry or perhaps agents through a similar registry, you can have some kind of notion of PageRank or trust across that. And lots of folks pushing on this space.
Trusted lists. Okay. All right. So do you want to tell us what your key recommendations are for different people, different audiences? What are your recommendations for GPT, since that's your target?
GPT can keep doing what it's doing. It's fun, Just keep replying to my questions. So I think for builders who are building in this space, kind of the scrappy YCs of this world,
Yep.
rather than reinventing the wheel, as many folks do, and vibe coding brand new standards out of thin air, I think the scrappy builders should look to existing standards that exist and build atop them and leverage them and the community support and trust that they have. For enterprises and folks deploying agents at scale with a sense of building this robustly, I think you should not only use the existing standards, but think about what is missing and contribute that back two standards bodies that might be positioned to build solutions. And then I think for the standards bodies, it's to listen to that feedback from large players trying to build out scalable AI systems and taking targeted, focused working groups that can move fast and push towards finding solutions in a consensus way towards those problems.
If you could pick one working group to add to the OpenID Foundation,
Mm.
what working group would that be?
Uh, Something along the lines of scalable dynamic access controls. And I don't really know what that would look like.
Scalable and dynamic access. SADA.
Stay tuned.
Trying to design the
Some
logo.
combination of cross-app authorization, like the identity assertion grant, with natural language access controls, or moving beyond RBAC in flexible ways. Some combination of those where we really focus on what standards exist and are they scalable. Not in the human scaling sense, can we handle so many users, but can we handle the speed at which AI operates?
Speed. Okay, got it. So how quickly do you think we need to work in order to design that standard at the time at which it is needed?
Well, I mean, this is akin to the classic San Francisco question of what is your timeline on AGI? And similar to that question, there's two answers. Either we have almost no time left at all, or we have decades and we can all relax. But if we have decades and we can all relax, we should start working on it as though we need this within the next year or two, because that may be true and we don't want to be caught flat-footed.
Yeah, we are probably building the plane on the way down, but can't be sure.
I think we're building the plane on the way down with limited materials as well.
Yeah, yeah. Super fun. Okay. Anything else you wish I had asked you, but I haven't?
No, I guess I'll put in a plug for the OpenID Foundation's Artificial Intelligence Identity Management community group, which hosts discussions about these kind of topics on a weekly basis. And a shout out to folks to read the paper, the white paper, or at the very least, put it into ChatGPT and ask it to summarize for you. You can have like a voice-based dialogue through ChatGPT. You upload the PDF, you click the voice thing, you say, tell me about the paper, you ask follow-up questions. It's quite good.
Then they can vibe code some de facto standards.
What a world we live in.
Exactly. Well, Dr. South, thank you so much for spending time with me this afternoon. I really appreciate it. And I can't recommend the paper strongly enough. It was a great read, fun to edit. You really know your way around an M dash.
I have to, this is my okay, final comment. I have to start removing M dashes from writing because I love them, but they sound ChatGPT.
Yeah, they do. They do. Yeah.
And it's truly one of the biggest struggles of my life.
I have the same problem. On that note, thanks everyone for tuning in.
It's been a pleasure. Reach out on LinkedIn or email to anyone who are interested.